Let's review the Brandeis methodology of base, build, boost. This is an important concept we're going to overlay on our embedded strength program. In the professional youth coach course, we learned about the 3 training phases kids go through: base, build, and boost. In base, kids are learning to control their bodies. They're learning kinesthetic awareness, where their body is in relation to itself, and proprioception, where their body is in relation to external objects. In this phase, we rely heavily on Brandeis movement skills. Movement skills are static portions of a movement that kids first need to master for positional consistency prior to learning a related progression or a whole movement. Sometimes a movement skill can even be used as a global strategy for movement. We go into a lot of depth with movement skills and how to use them in our plug-and-play mentoring calls, so I won't spend a lot of time going over them here. But what is really important to take away is Brandeis movement skills represent tier 0 in our movement hierarchy. They're the foundation that we build good movement on. I think of movement skills as the rules for good movement. So in base, we're teaching kids the rules for good movement, and then they take those rules and begin applying those in tier 1 movements. Tier 1 movements are movements that can be slowed down or paused. In other words, in tempo style. Using tempo and slowing movement down allows us as coaches the opportunity to ensure the kids are hitting the points of performance and checkpoints we want them to, and it allows kids the opportunity to gain control of the movement through the entire range of motion we're working on. Once a child understands the rules for movement and has been introduced to tier 1 movements, they move to the build phase. In the build phase, we're going to test whether they can remember and apply the rules they've learned as their movement vocabulary expands. Using the squat pattern as an example, a child might enter the build phase having been introduced to the block squat, the box squat, and the air squat. In build, they would be introduced to the goblet squat, the front squat, back squat, the Zercher squat. We want to see if they can remember the rules they learned about the squat as the position of the load changes for them. As their movement vocabulary expands and they prove they can remember the rules for movement, we can introduce them to tier 2 movements. Tier 2 movements are movements that require speed. Think of throwing a medicine ball or jumping. We're looking to see if they can move well if we introduce an element of power or speed. In boost, kids are now ready to train. We continue to use tier 1 movements to gain strength, and we use tier 2 and 3 movements for power and complexity. Looking at base, build, and boost, we can see that in base, it's about teaching. Build is about testing, and boost is about performance. We talk about this all the time. People want to rush to the boost phase, but the hard work required to maximize an athlete's potential in boost is all done in base and build. I really want to emphasize this. A young athlete is ready for boost when they understand the rules for good movement, can use them effectively, including in novel ways, and when speed is introduced.